and thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to talk about this. It's my first time actually giving a talk where I'm consolidating my 3 root concepts of healthy eating for an audience. So there is a little bit of science here, but I'm going to try to skip through some of the complicated stuff and really try to get you to the gist of what I'm saying. How many here are scientists or have a background in science? So a lot of you. No, actually, only a few. All right. So I'm going to really try to skip through some of the hardcore data. If you see some interesting graphs and you want me to stop, I will and explain you some of the graphs. But otherwise, I'll try to get to the more practical points. So healthy eating, you hear so many people talking about nutrition and nutritionism, and there's a lot of backlash, and there's always a fad new diet that's coming out. Should you be eating more carbs? Should we be eating more protein, more fat? What kind of fat? What about the micronutrients versus the macronutrients? Animal products versus plant-based products? Milk versus the plant-based milks? And I think that I've consolidated it all in 3 root concepts, and maybe we'll ask you later if you agree. The first one I call feeding the fire. I'm going to try to get rid of that cursor. So feeding the fire is a concept that's relatively recent. How many of you know what inflammation is? I've heard the term inflammation. A good number of you have heard that. Well, I'll still try to define it a little bit, but disease, and especially chronic disease and diseases of aging, have a lot to do with chronic low-grade inflammation that burns maybe a little bit above the low heat where it's supposed to burn. It's kind of like turning up the thermostat at home from the 70, 72 degree comfort zone to maybe the 77, 78 degrees, or maybe even going a little bit over 80. So you're a little uncomfortable, and that's what happens a lot of times with chronic diseases. And some of the foods that we're eating, a lot of the new foods, the imitation foods, the foods that really have come about in the last maybe 30 years, and are processed and refined by the food industry and adulterated by the food industry to increase profit margins and also increase shelf life. For example, how many times do you think McDonald's changes the oil for the French fries every day? Not very often, and that's because the oil has been manufactured in a way that will increase its smoke point and its burning point. But it turns out that a lot of those nutrients turn on immune signals in the body that upregulate inflammation and cause that thermostat to burn just a little bit hotter. And that can lead to diseases of aging, from hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, which can lead to stroke and heart disease, cancer with cells and genetic defects not being able to get neutralized, liver disease, kidney disease, and a lot of others really are a product of chronic inflammation in the body. And we're going to talk about how that really relates to your health. The second root concept has to do with fertilizing the wrong guys in the gut. So in the last 10, 15 years, we've realized that there's a lot more to you than just you. And everybody here is really only 10% human and 90% bacteria. So the gut incorporates hundreds different kinds of species of bacteria that we haven't been able to cultivate, to culture using regular techniques. But nowadays there's new technique, molecular techniques that have enabled us not just to isolate, but to characterize the bacteria that live within us. And we are superorganisms. We are microecologies of species, not just bacteria, but hopefully not too many other species that colonize within us. But the intestinal flora can really be both healthy and unhealthy for us. And what we eat fertilizes that bacteria. It's not just that we're eating food for us, we're actually eating food for them as well. And they can affect how you feel. Lastly, starving the masses. Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more people that are overfed and undernourished. Certainly, no one is immune from a little bit of extra pounds here and there. Food is very accessible. Life today is quite sedentary. But going to your doctor and hearing eat less and exercise more, I'm sure most of you are tired of hearing that. It's easier said than done. And if you're only focusing on calories, then you may be missing a lot of the other reasons that we eat food. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the Starving the Masses, because most of the food that we eat is very nutrient sparse. It's very calorie dense, but the refining and processing of food oftentimes strips it of its micronutrient content. And we're going to talk about some of my personal interests in clinical nutrition and medical nutrition, and how there are some foods that are simply considered to be superfoods. And I have some other slides regarding just general advice regarding medical nutrition. So I'll start with feeding the fire. So inflammation is an immune-mediated response. The immune system is what helps you be you. What separates you from the person sitting next to you. We are, in a way, a biological continuum of life. And the line between you and your neighbor, or you and me, is very much a gray zone. We have a continuity of life that really continues throughout the room. We're not just islands, we are part of the continent. And the person who's really responsible, or the first person to describe these pattern recognition receptors, these are molecular receptors that sense your neighbor and are able to differentiate friend from foe, enemy from non-enemy. And that person is Ruslan Metsitov, who has a very interesting story. He escaped the former Soviet Union in the mid-'80s, and it's a very intricate story. He was chased by the Soviet Union he was a tremendous scientist, and he came to work with Charles Janeway at Yale University. And in 1997 published not this report, but this is a report, an update in 2010 that he wrote on inflammation, New Adventures of an Old Flame. And it's only in the last couple of years that we're realizing that inflammatory pathway has a lot to do with chronic disease. And what he describes in this paper is that there are certain inducers, and those inducers can be bugs, bacteria, or viruses, but those inducers can also be components of food. The inducers are somehow sensed by our immune system. He discovered these toll-like receptors that are found on immune cells. And then through several mediators, all kinds of cytokines and leukotrienes, they target tissues like the liver and the intestines and the arteries and the heart and create an inflammatory response. So he's been very instrumental in our understanding of inflammation. And these are the toll-like receptors, and again, this is just a nice graphic that I can skip over. And to quote him from his recent paper in 2010, human cells deal with various types of noxious conditions by inducing appropriate stress responses that ensure adaptation and survival in the face of an abnormal cellular environment. Certainly today's modern environment is abnormal for what we've adapted to live around. So how does our body adapt to an unnatural surrounding? So adaptation requires changing the homeostatic set points to different values that are better suited to deal with the extreme or persistent abnormal conditions, sort of like turning up the thermostat. And really the bottom line for this first part, for this root concept of feeding the fire, is that you want to eat food that flies under the radar, food that we have, that is easy for our body to assimilate, food that as Homo sapiens over thousands of years we have adapted to and easily recognize as being food, not food that's hard for our body to recognize as food. And the point of intervention is really right here, because years of active inflammatory disease can create a whole bunch of conditions. And I'll skip through some of this to get to the more practical stuff. This is data that really links certain fatty acid motifs with inflammation. And in this particular slide, you note that certain saturated fats, like C14, C16, and C18, create a much higher expression of this interleukin than, for example, omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, and DHA. So certain fats are believed to be pro-inflammatory, and certain fats are believed to be anti-inflammatory. Well, our modern diet is about 20-to-1 ratio of pro-inflammatory fats to non-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory fats. And really, if you wanted to go back to a more natural state of eating, we want that ratio to be as close to 1-to-1 as possible. And that really includes reducing a lot of animal flesh consumption, which are rich in omega-6s. This is another a nice slide that shows that there's a dose response to the free fatty acids, similar to lipopolysaccharide, which is the endotoxin from gram-negative bacteria. So this slide really shows you that certain foods are not recognized as food. They're recognized as bacteria. Interestingly enough, if you co-incubate the good fat with the bad fat, you abrogate the results, the inflammation that's incurred by eating just the bad fat alone. So if you eat a little bit of fish along with a little bit of red meat, you may be able to abrogate some of the harmful effects of red meat. But the idea is to always have balance in your diet, so you're not just eating one kind of food. And it's not just free fatty acids that induce inflammation. In this more very recent article in the British Journal of Nutrition in 2011, you see the capacity of foodstuffs, all kind of food, to induce innate immune activation of human monocytes in vitro is dependent on food content of stimulants of toll-like receptors 2 and 4. And a lot of more data is going to be coming out regarding how food turns up inflammation in the body. Okay, so now something a little bit more practical. How many of you have heard of Michael Pollan? Okay, good. If you have heard, Michael Pollan is a journalism professor out of Berkeley, and he has devoted his life at this point really to trying to get us to understand where our food comes from. And he wrote this very good book. It's only about 200 pages. I would encourage everyone to read it, called In Defense of Food, An Eater's Manifesto. Came out just in the last few years. And he sums it up by saying, eat food, and he defines what he means by food, not too much, mostly plants. And the way he defines food is to eat what your great-grandmother would recognize as food. Food that doesn't come out of a package. Food that doesn't have more than 5 or 6 ingredients. Eating food that is whole or intact. Food that, again, your ancestors would easily recognize as food. He also says to eat whole, intact, wild or raw food as much as possible. To eat food, again, with fewer ingredients. To eat less animal products. To try to shop at farmers markets, or at least at the periphery of grocery stores where the fresher food comes into. The food that's packed in the middle of grocery stores is often the one that has the longest shelf life. And the longer the shelf life for food, probably the more adulterated and unnatural it is. Seek dietary complexity. So you want complexity to your diet. You want a lot of variety. And one of the problems with modern food is that 70% of the calories that each of us consume on average come from soy, corn, and wheat. So it's very difficult to get complexity in the diet when processed food consists of 3 main ingredients that are broken down into little Lego pieces and then put back together. So make sure you eat whole, intact food because it's easier to determine that you're actually getting complexity in your diet. Stick to the food chain. For example, with animal products, someone asked about milk. And the same thing goes for animal flesh. Today's animals are being fed corn. So when you're eating a nice steak from a corn-fed beef, you're really just eating corn. It would be much better if you could eat beef that is grass grazing. You would get and reap the benefits of the nutrients that are found in the grass, a lot of the phytonutrients. And as much as possible, try to avoid going out to restaurants, and eating more at home is something else that he advocates. I know that's becoming more and more difficult nowadays. Eating slowly and to stop eating before you're full has already been mentioned, and the eat to 80% full is something that he discusses as well. So again, we want to, just to reiterate, you want to eat food that you have co-evolved with, not just you personally, but us as a species, food that our body would easily recognize as food. And you want to try to avoid the food that's produced in mass, where it's adulterated and processed, and our immune system may not recognize as food, and therefore send their immune system to go and counter that and say, hey, are you food or are you an enemy? And sometimes just that preparation alone is enough to turn up the thermostat to a level where you can create some chronic disease in your body. So the second root concept is fertilizing the weeds. And I do have some complicated slides here, so I'll skip through them and try to get to the end. But really, there is a balance of inflammation in the body. You need a little bit of inflammation. The immune system has to be turned on a little bit, just in case you bump your knee or get bitten by a tick or encounter someone with a cold. So the immune system has to be ready to attack. However, if the immune system is overactive, again, it's going to lead to injury. Well, it turns out that inflammation and the immune system functions through microbial signaling. And the microbes are microbes that are found within us, that colonize our own body. And this is an article that came out in the Boston Globe in 2008. And this author introduced the concept of the microbiome. The microbiome is the sum collection of all the microbes that live within our bodies. We are a colony of creatures, and there is more to you than you. For example, if you look at this bar graph, we have about 100 trillion bacterial cells that live within us. The number of human cells is only 10 trillion. So only 10% of the cells in your body are actually eukaryotic human cells. The rest are prokaryotic bacterial cells. More striking, possibly, is the number of genes. We have about 18 to 20,000 human genes, but there are probably closer to 3 million microbial genes that make up part of the metagenome within us. And that's something that's being currently worked on in the lab to try to sequence the entire metagenome, which is a very formidable task. But these genes certainly exert an influence on our health. So the gut microbiome, I think most people know that we can't digest everything we eat, so bacteria help digestion. They help ferment certain food residue. They help us assimilate certain micronutrients. They help us detoxify things like antibiotics. They also have byproducts. Some of those byproducts are good, like vitamins, vitamin K, biotin, vitamin B12. But some of the metabolites may cause cancer, certain indoles. And we know that there is a correlation between bad bacteria and colon cancer, for example. The bacteria also help with the immune system. They process antigens for presentation to the immune system. And they help us recognize, again, self from foreign. And I'll skip this slide, but what it really shows you, again, is that balance can be tipped by a pathogen and can trigger inflammation in the body. But oftentimes we can help balance that fulcrum by providing some good bacteria, something we call probiotics. So new molecular technique has enabled us to create these fingerprints. So we can actually collect stool samples from patients or mucosal samples and run a very high throughput sequencing machinery and get a fingerprint or a stool print or a bacterial print of each and every one of you. And you'll see that there is a core microbiome which makes these three individuals look very similar. It's only at the tips, it's at the leaves of these fingerprints where we see that there is differentiation between each individual. So in some ways we are very much alike, but in other ways we are each individuals. And these are the various phyla that are found within our body. We are actually 98% of the bacteria in the gut belong to just two large phyla, the Firmicutes and the Bacteroidetes. And the other 2% is really just a conglomerate of other bacteria. And this core human microbiome is affected by a lot of different things, including our lifestyle, such as diet, our pathobiology, infection or illness, host environment, such as travel to other locations, transient community members, certain viruses that we come in contact with, as well as our physiology, such as bowel habits. All these things can really affect both the core microbiome as well as the variable microbiome. So the bacteria that colonize you can change depending on what you eat, where you go, who you live with, and how healthy you are, what medications you take, etc. The interesting part about these fingerprints is that we are discovering that diseased individuals have different clusters of bacteria from healthy individuals. And this, out of Nature 2010, clearly shows that patients with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis have a different constellation of bacteria relative to a healthy individual. So again, the bacteria within you can determine your overall health. So are there any food-based strategies that help modulate the composition of the intestinal microbiota and their associated health effects? Certainly they are. And I think a lot of you, how many of you have heard of probiotics? Many, almost all. How about prebiotics? Okay, so probiotics are the actual bacteria. And fermented food, yogurt, kombucha, even sauerkraut, certain wines, I mean, these are fermented foods. And as long as they're fermented with bacteria that is healthful, that provides health to our body, then they're called probiotics. Prebiotics are really just food. Another word for prebiotics is fiber. It's food that we don't digest, but that will get fermented by bacteria that are selected for beneficial effects. So prebiotics are like fertilizing the grass. And if you have a nice lawn that's very green and grassy, and the best way to keep it that way is to fertilize it with food that will select for the good grass and not select for the weeds. And what we're doing nowadays in our standard American diet is really selecting for a lot of bad bacteria. Sugars, simple refined carbohydrates, animal products, lack of fiber. How many of you have heard from your doctor you need to eat more fiber? Okay, all the time. I mean, fiber is so important for regularity, but it's actually more than just for regularity that it's important. It can help you maintain health by fertilizing the grass. So I'm going to skip this. There's a long list of effects that we attribute to probiotics, and that's an entire different lecture. And there is lots of medical application for probiotics beyond just recurrent urinary tract infections. And we try to use probiotics nowadays in a lot of GI disease, from chronic constipation to inflammatory bowel disease. And I'll skip this a little bit too, just to get to the practical slides. It just really defines the prebiotics and tells you that there are certain criteria that establish them. And the fermentation of prebiotics has several physiologic effects. Number one, it increases the number of bifidobacteria in the colon. Two, it increases calcium absorption. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of constantly taking calcium pills, we would actually learn how to better extract calcium from the food that we already ate, or better absorb calcium? It increases fecal weight, which has been shown to help with regularity. It shortens intestinal transit time. It can lower blood lipids, which may reduce your reliance on certain medications. Most of us have some abnormalities in our lipid profile, and we all are trying to get our good cholesterol up and our bad cholesterol down. Well, fiber can help you do that. And how about, so which foods should you really focus on? Well, the number one food that really has a lot of prebiotics are root vegetables. And root vegetables are very rich in inulin and fructooligosaccharides that fertilize the grass, that really try to upregulate bifidobacteria counts in the colon. So things like chicory, yam, agave, carrot, beet, onion, garlic, leeks, parsnip, turnip, jicama, celery, and others. Go to Trader Joe's doesn't have a great root selection, but most Whole Foods and Sprouts do. Go to Whole Foods. Look at their beautiful root selection. Not too crazily priced. I know everything else at Whole Foods is like your whole paycheck, but the root selection is actually not too bad and not too expensive. And you can incorporate this into soups, into roasts. You can just steam them or boil them and add them to potatoes for a root mash. And a little bit goes a long way. Vegetables are actually not terribly rich in the specific inulin that upregulates bifidobacteria, but it has other beneficial fiber. Artichoke is actually the number one fruit with inulin, but other vegetables as well have tons of other mostly insoluble fiber, but less of the soluble type. All the whole grains, brown rice, sprouted wheat, quinoa, oat, rye, barley, millet, kasha, all have been shown to help with lipid profiles, for example. Certain legumes like soy, peas, beans, garbanzo beans, fruit, and really one message that I want you to take away is that a lot of people are afraid of eating fruit for its sugar content, but fruit has so much fiber that it really attenuates the glucose absorption. You really can't eat enough fruit. It's such a micronutrient-dense food. It's something that really needs to be incorporated for everyone on a daily basis. And then nuts, seeds, dried fruit, all make great snacks. And nuts especially are a good source, especially walnuts, a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. But these are all foods that have prebiotic value. So the last piece is starving the masses. And this has a lot to do with the obesity epidemic. So this is, to quote Michael Pollan in his book, In Defense of Food, a whole food might be more than the sum of its nutrient parts. So if we take food and strip it down from its whole components, so corn in and of itself is an excellent food. I mean, it has a lot of nutrient value. And so does wheat and soy. But what the food industry does is it strips it down, refines it, and then puts it back together into Twinkies. And we know Twinkies don't have the same nutrient value as these three components alone. So how does that really work? Well, I think there's been an overemphasis on this macronutrients, on large molecules. A lot of people, and if you go to any restaurant nowadays, the emphasis is always on calories. And I don't want you to think so much about calories, because calories, I think, can somehow confuse you. You can certainly eat a lot of calories without getting a lot of nutrient benefit. So the macronutrients are proteins, but there's lots of different kinds of proteins. There's high quality versus low quality proteins depending on the essential amino acid components. There is a nitrogen load, which can increase your risk for cancer from certain proteins. There are sulfur-containing amino acids, and there are branched-chain amino acids that help maintain lean body mass. Soy, for example, is very rich food in branched-chain amino acids, which is good for athletes. Carbohydrates, well, we know there's simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates, some with low glycemic load and some that have a high glycemic load. And then the story of fat, that's never ending. Which fat are we supposed to eat? The saturated, the unsaturated, the monounsaturated, or the polyunsaturated? The long chain, the medium chain? I mean, it really is confusing, don't you think? So to try to simplify it, I'm going to introduce the micronutrients. No, just kidding. This will not simplify things at all. It's the last slides that will. But what I'm trying to tell you that there's a lot more than macronutrients to your eating, and that there are a lot more micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytonutrients, the antioxidants, and other factors that are called anti-angiogenic factors. How many of you heard of angiogenesis? Okay, a few. Angio comes from blood vessel, and genesis comes from the formation of. Well, guess what the first thing that a cancer does when it arises in a body? And cancer arises in us all the time. There's constant genetic mutations in cells. It's just that our immune system is oftentimes able to recognize it and neutralize cancer before it spreads. But the first thing that cancer does when it arises is produce angiogenic factors to bring blood flow to the cancer. So the first thing the cancer needs is nutrition. Turns out that food has a lot of anti-angiogenic factors that can help you neutralize cancer before it spreads. Unfortunately, we're stripping food of a lot of these micronutrient factors when we put it through the mill and refine it the way our food industry is. And so we have a condition where a lot of people in our society are overfed and undernourished, something that we see on a clinical level. Interestingly enough, have any of you ever heard of beriberi? Or pellagra? So those were, due to thiamine B1 and niacin B3 deficiencies, and really far in the Far East when they started refining rice and other kinds of grains, is when they started noticing these diseases. And it's a good thing that we caught them and were able to reverse those. But the question is obesity another one of those conditions? where we're eating so many macronutrients and calories, but really depriving our bodies of essential micronutrients? You know, interestingly enough, intake of daily multivitamins have not been shown to decrease morbidity or prolong longevity. And obesity and related disorders arise with consumption of a modern Western diet, even of immigrant populations that come across. So there's some kind of a maladaptation process. And another thing that we know of now is that obesity is an inflammatory syndrome that's notable for nutritional deficiencies and end organ dysfunction. So this is from 2009, but this is from 2010. And at this point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 states, about a fourth of the union, has an obesity rate of greater than 30%. And there was a recent series of articles at the Lancet that predicts that by 2030, over 50% of the US population will be obese. And the overall cost that we're incurring as a society, just to put a number on it, the non-numerical cost is obviously much greater, but the financial cost to our system is about $150 billion a year just to treat obesity-related disorders. But obesity is more than meets the eye, because it turns out that obesity is not just determined by your body mass index, by how tall you are compared to how heavy you are. It's also determined by what you eat and your composition, your body composition. And a new syndrome is now called normal weight obese syndrome, early inflammation with a question mark, published in 2007. Is it possible that some people that don't show obesity are still predisposed to the same chronic diseases because they have ongoing inflammation in their body? And this is a graph that tries to show that normal weight obese individuals have upregulated immune response that's more similar to obese individuals than to non-obese individuals. So in conclusion, really what you want to focus on is eating micronutrient-dense food. Don't just look at calories, don't just look at fat and protein and carbohydrates, but really choose food, again, that's whole and intact, and plant-based especially, because those are the foods that are the most micronutrient-rich. Again, fruit, vegetables, roots, leaves, whole grains, lentils, legumes and pulses, nuts, seeds, olives, mushrooms, fish, and algae are probably the most micronutrient-dense foods. Now, certainly there are meat lovers amongst us, and meat will be much more nutritious if it's consumed from animals that were part of the food chain, that ate what their natural habitat is supposed to be. If you eat, though, a steak that comes from corn-fed beef, you're just eating more corn. Okay, so as far as supplements, just because I have 3 more slides. So the supplement list, because a lot of people always ask me, doctor, which supplements should I take? And there's a long list of supplements that I think may or may not be helpful. But I just got together just a short list here of the supplements that I believe are probably have the strongest scientific basis. The first is omega-3 fatty acids, and that's probably the new sexy nutrient nowadays. It used to be vitamin D. It's still sexy, but not as sexy as omega-3s. And omega-3 fatty acids can be from flaxseed or other seeds and nuts, sardines and salmon, algae, and you can also get prescription strength. And ask your doctor about that, because we have a couple of good choices, like Lavazza is one, and it's an ultra-pure form of omega-3 fatty acid, and it's been in clinical trials proven to lower bad cholesterol and increase the good cholesterol. And a lot of people ask me about fish oil, and it is true that certain fish oils can contain contaminants. So I actually usually recommend the flaxseed oil, and I've seen it work clinically. But 1 to 3 grams of omega-3 fatty acids, in addition to just consuming a diet that's high in omega-3s, may help your lipid profile as well as help overall cognitive function. Psyllium husk, one of my favorite fiber supplements. This has been in use for millennia. There is a great product at Trader Joe's called Secrets of the Psyllium. By the way, I have no disclosures, no financial disclosures with Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. I shop all the grocery stores, including Ralph's, Vons, and Albertsons. But I do like the psyllium husk brand from TJ's, and I put it into my morning fruit smoothies. And I'm a gastroenterologist, so I can just tell you, you will have a very pleasant bathroom experience if you incorporate psyllium husk into your diet. Vitamin D, another great vitamin to increase calcium absorption and increase bone mineral density. And there are recent studies that show that it's more important that your vitamin D level is high enough to absorb Vitamin D regulates calcium absorption from the gut. So it's more important to get vitamin D than calcium. And you can actually get better bone mineral density by getting your vitamin D level to the 40 to 50 range than to just continuing to take calcium and maintaining the same standard American diet. Vitamin C, vitamin C, it's like, it used to be sexy. It really lost its sex appeal, and I'm trying to bring it back. But I think 500 to 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C can help boost your immune system and may reduce cold frequency of respiratory infections. I really like N-acetylcysteine, but you can also get some resveratrol. Resveratrol is a natural antioxidant found in red grapes as well as in red wine. N-acetylcysteine is a chemical. It's an amino acid, but it's a precursor to the main antioxidant in your body and has been shown to help with certain liver conditions, and that's how I learned about it. There are others. I'd be happy to discuss them with you, but I see Dr. Panich is standing, so I'm going to try to get through this. Certain medicinal foods. Number one, water. Drink water. There's probably nothing more therapeutic than cleansing your body with water. And I know a lot of us like the new various sodas and sugary or alternative drinks. And I don't think that you need to eliminate those, but I think it's important that you incorporate water into your daily routine. Find a time in your day. I like to do it with meals. And I like to save actually the Diet Cokes and whatnot as a snack or as a treat. But with meals, I really try to always incorporate 1 or 2 glasses of water. Honey. Honey is the only food that never requires that doesn't require refrigeration and never goes bad. It's the way that ancient Egyptians used to preserve their dead. Mummies were wrapped with honey. And nowadays we know that honey in the outskirts of the world where they don't have access to antibiotics, they're using honey for its antiseptic qualities, for bed sores, for various infections, and we have some data on it for ulcerative colitis, which is a GI entity. So honey is very soothing for colds, for tonsillitis, for recurrent sinus infections, and is a natural immune booster. Ginger, I think a lot of you probably know about the health benefits of ginger for things like gastritis, but also tonsillitis, and it has anti-inflammatory effects. People that have heartburn really benefit from ginger. Green tea, for its flavonoid content, try to drink green tea, cold or warm. Again, flaxseed, a real miracle food, has tremendous micronutrients, very micronutrient dense. You can buy like a little grinder or a mill and put flaxseed in it and grind some fresh flaxseed onto your salad or on avocado, which is another great medicinal food, very rich in vitamin E, C, and A, great in fiber, and has a very good source of fat that can help preserve the life of cells. Coconut oil, and coconut in general, has medium chain triglycerides, very easy to digest. And then walnuts, which are, again, very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And this is just a short list of medicinal foods that I like to try to get my patients to incorporate into their diet. And then my last slide is just these healthy habits. So number one, of course, eat less and exercise more. And if there is a fountain of youth, it is exercise. Portions the size of your fist. I'm a pediatrician, so maybe that works a little bit better in pediatrics. But eat to 80% full. Leave room for dessert. And snack between meals. Keep your metabolism at an increased rate. Okay, so snacking is actually encouraged as long as it's healthy snacking. Grab a fruit between breakfast and lunch. Grab some nuts between lunch and dinner. Don't enter meals too hungry, and you have a less of a chance to overeat. Really focus on getting a vegetable with every meal. Try fruit for dessert. It doesn't work for everyone. Some people feel like it makes them a little bloated, so there is individuality to that. But I love that, rule of thumb. You can do the ice cream and cake periodically, but try fruit for dessert. Drink water. Brush your teeth after meals. If you have a hard time stopping to eat, a lot of people, they say, I'm not hungry until I start eating. And then once I start eating, I just can't stop. Sometimes you just have to pry yourself from the table, go brush your teeth. That fresh feeling may prevent you from eating more. Again, try to eat at home. Avoid fast food restaurants at all costs. Ask for takeaway containers and split your meal even before you take your first bite. We're serving very large portions in restaurants nowadays. Try to avoid industry-processed oils, try to avoid high fructose corn syrup, and avoid packaged food with more than 5 ingredients. Okay, sorry for going over time. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to getting some questions.